What happens is that if you've been a franchisee for a long time, through the school of hard knocks, you'll figure it out. It's going to take you years to get there. And some people are more systematic than others.
Sure.
There's some people that just fly by the seat of the pants, right? And then they're trying to grow this multi-unit organization without the discipline of sitting down and documenting. It's hard for some people. And so those are the ones that are systematic thinking are the ones that are able to accomplish that dramatic, explosive growth. And the ones that are not systematic are the ones that are struggling and get stuck.
You're listening to RevOps Champions, a podcast created for B2B leaders to help you align your people, streamline your processes, trust your data, and leverage technology in order to grow your business. Hello and welcome back to the RevOps Champions podcast. Today, I'm joined by Aicha Bascaro, CEO and founder of the American Franchise Academy, which I will be referring to for the next 45 minutes or so as AFA. AFA is a franchise operator, educator, and strategist focused on helping businesses scale through structured, repeatable systems, which of course here at Dynamico we love. With over 35 years of experience in franchising, Aicha has held leadership roles across globally recognized brands like Domino's Pizza, Popeyes, Olive Garden, Pretzel Maker, you name it, supporting operations across more than 26 countries. Aicha brings a rare combination of perspectives as a franchise operator, franchise executive, and founder, which shapes her practical execution-first approach to scaling businesses. Through the AFA, Aicha has trained thousands of franchise owners, unit managers, and district leaders using structured programs designed to improve operational consistency, leadership capability, and multi-unit performance. Her work centers on building scalable systems that enable long-term sustainable growth rather than short-term wins. Aicha, welcome to the RevOps Champions podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here. What a great introduction.
Well, you've had a lot of decades of experience, so it was all worthwhile and sets us up for a great conversation.
Yeah, sometimes I wonder, I feel like I'm pretty old when I look back at all the things that I have done, but at the same time, I don't feel that old. So, it's kind of neat.
Yeah, we're just getting started, Aicha. We're just getting started. Okay, so Aicha, you spent decades in franchising. What can revenue leaders learn from franchise models when it comes to building repeatable revenue systems?
Wow, so much. One of the wonderful things about the franchise model, which I fell in love when I first started as a temporary job, is that it's really a set of systems and processes that once you figure out what works, if you repeat that consistently, you're going to have predictable results. And we always said marketing brings the sales and operations keeps it. But at the same time, one of the things that I teach is that operators must also own sales. So I think it should be a partnership. It is true that do we need to have a great marketing team with amazing strategy and tactics and innovation and products? Definitely. But I still do believe that operations still can own sales because they are the ones that are providing the experience to the customers. And it's a lot cheaper to bring people coming back than it is to try to get new ones all the time. And so I think it's a great partnership between both. And we both need to own the sales so that we can have the results of year-over-year growth ongoingly and sustainably. I don't think it's one side or the other. I think it's both. And that's how I see it.
Yeah, no, that's really good. And then Aicha, I'm guessing one of the reasons that you started AFA was because you felt that there was something missing, sort of a support system that was missing for franchisees where they needed education. Tell us a little bit more about how you started and why you started the AFA.
Yeah, I had over 25-year career at that point when I left my last job as the president of the Pretzel Maker brand, and I was taking a sabbatical. Or so I thought it was going to be a sabbatical, right? And my kids were going into high school and, my husband would say, let's take a break a little bit here and try to figure out what's next, for me. And literally in the middle of that sabbatical, I started getting phone calls from franchisees I'd known in my career and even some franchisors asking me to do special projects for them with franchisees that I had built a really good relationship with throughout my career. And what was interesting is what the questions they were asking me, it was not about how do I do the product or how do I do the marketing or How do I, improve, the image of my product? What the questions they were asking me were business management questions. How do I hire, retain the best people? How do I truly control the cost in my business? How do I reduce the break-even point or make more profit, right? How do I grow a multi-unit enterprise? How do I supervise? How many units per district manager, et cetera, et cetera? And so those are the questions that I was able to answer because I was actually an operator. I had run over 60 units for the company, corporate stores for Domino's. I had run the Atlanta region for Popeyes. I had the Georgia and Alabama area for Olive Garden. So I'm a true operator. And so because of that, my education had been also in the business management system. So I was able to help them create those processes and procedures so that they could scale. And so as they were asking me the questions, one of them actually one day asked me, I said, Aicha, I cannot ask you all the questions. Can you please write a book? And I'm like, wow, okay, that will be kind of a nice thing to do and write a book. Actually wrote a book I dedicated to Mr. Philip, who inspired me to write the book. And the book is The Franchise Fix. I don't know if you can see it there.
Yeah,
And so I wrote it
we'll put a link
dedicated
to
to
that.
him.
Yeah,
Say it again.
yeah. We'll put a link to that in the show notes.
Great. Yes.
Right.
Actually, it became an Amazon bestseller when it was launched. And it's still
Congratulations.
there. Yeah. People love it. We have now franchisors buying that book for their franchisees as part of their welcome package for when they first join the brand.
Fantastic.
And so I just realized that there was a huge need with all the questions. I became the accidental consultant first. And I never been a consultant. I worked for the company, for the corporation, and I actually ran a franchise on behalf of a franchisee in the Bahamas. I ran Domino's and Dairy Queen in the Bahamas for 3 years. Anyway, so from being the accidental consultant, I realized that there was a true need for that. And so one thing led to another. I started doing personalized coaching, and then I turned it into a group coaching, and they become a mastermind. And it just became, just grew and grew. And so now what we do is we dedicate ourselves to helping franchisees implement those business management systems that complement the brand systems so that they can actually have profitable, scalable, successful enterprises. And then one thing led to another. They start asking me, hey, Aicha, I hired a district manager you told me to hire. What do they do? What's their job, right? And so I realized that many franchisees that grow multi-unit have never been a district manager, never been trained on being a district manager. And so we created a program to train their district manager. So that was the next thing. And then once we launched that, they say, okay, Aicha, now what about the managers, right? They get trained on how to do the product, the service, the image, operations, equipment, but none of the leadership and the management skills. So then we, over 2 years ago, we launched a unit management program. So we literally are now in an education organization dedicated to support franchisees and go multi-unit successfully and profitably and their leaders so that they don't have to train. It's because some of them don't even know what to train or how to train. And sometimes you don't want to train, right? And so that's what we have become. We become the training arm and partner for franchisees to be successful because it grew. Actually, we're going to be celebrating our 10th anniversary this July.
Wow,
And we're super excited about that. And we've grown slowly but surely just, by word of mouth and some of our social media presence. But now after our 10th anniversary, we are planning to go big now.
Yeah, it reminds me of it's taken you 10 years to become an overnight success, right?
Yes. Yeah. People are like, where have you been? I never heard of you. And, where have you been all my life? Oh my gosh, I wish I know what you're teaching. When I first started 10 years ago, yeah, we've been around, but you're right. We're one of those 10-year overnight success. People are starting to hear about us and know about us.
Right. And actually, you and I were connected because you did the unit level economics session the day before IFA 26 just a couple of months ago. How do you connect? I mean, obviously you become an expert at unit level economics. And of course, within the franchise, people listening who are outside of the franchise space, people are familiar with the term of unit economics, right? But when it comes to franchising, it has a slightly different meaning because what it really is talking about is that each individual franchise unit has to be profitable on its own. How do you connect that sort of unit level economics to the education that so many franchise owners and franchisees are coming to you for?
Yeah, it's interesting because that particular session was from the perspective of a franchisor. The IFA reached out to me about 3 years ago when they found out about me, and I'm an instructor for the IFA for the CFE certification.
Okay.
And I do franchisor content only for the IFA. And so that was a franchisor focus. And what I was teaching in that particular session was all the line items that affect, the franchise business. And then I actually share how franchisors have the power, and the responsibility to actually work through the business model of the franchise model to ensure that it's as profitable as possible. Now, they can create a very good, positive unit economics model, but it's up to the franchisee to manage the business to match that profitable model. It is not it is not rare. I mean, it happens that you can have a very successful, proven brand where the franchisees still fail. I mean, McDonald's fails, Subway's fail, Dairy Queen fail. I mean, the franchise brands, franchisees that fail, but why do they fail? A lot of the times in these cases, it's not that the brand model is not right, but that the franchisee did not have the proper business acumen, financial understanding of how to manage the business according to that business model. And when it comes to the franchisor, I just share and teach how everything that they do affects the unit economics of their model. And then from the franchisee side, everything that you do to manage against that model and controlling your costs and understanding what's the ideal cost of goods, what should be the target labor cost, what is a good range for a rent, how much should you be spending in your utilities, right? So that because all of that is going to be affecting your profitability. And so really the unit economics is a partnership between the franchisor creating a profitable model and then the franchisee understanding how to manage against that so that they can, maximize that profitability of the revenue that is brought by the brand. And so we teach the profitability from the franchisee all day, every day. We teach it to the franchisees, to the district managers, to the unit managers. So, and our goal is to change that, have a mindset shift, especially for the franchisees employees. A lot of them come in, they run a shift, they run their day, but because they don't have the total education, they don't understand that they're running a million or multi-million-dollar business. And so that's kind of what we teach, to approach what they do every day as a business, not just a shift. And hopefully we want to continue to influence franchisors and looking at the unit economics and their model so that they can provide something that the franchisee has a chance to be successful.
So Aicha, why do you think it is that so many franchise brands don't teach what you do?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say there are two reasons why they don't teach. The first one is a legal reason. There is this thing called joint employer liability that has been around for a long time, but in 2015, it really came to the forefront with a lot of litigation of franchisors becoming responsible for what the franchisee employees were doing. And they would, the law will tie the franchisee employee to the franchisor. And for that reason, they were, responsible. And the reason that happened was because, again, of these joint employer laws. And so what happened was that it told the franchisors, if you are getting involved in how the franchisee is managing their people, AKA, how do you recruit, interview, hire, on board, motivate, all the people managerial activities, then you automatically become a joint employer of those employees. And the franchisors, from 2015 on say, oh, wait a second. So you mean to tell me that the way that I will not be liable for what they do is by not teaching franchisees how to manage the people? All right. We're not teaching that anymore. And with that, we were not teaching them how to inventory. We did not teach them how to do all the other managerial tasks, right? So it really started with a joint employer. And then the second reason why franchisors don't teach that is because of money and resources. It takes money and resources to create a training department that not only teaches about the product, service, and image, but on top of that, they're providing a business degree in franchise management. I mean, if you go to college, how much are you paying for a business degree in franchise management, right? I have a business degree. That was 4 years. That was tens of thousands of dollars. Well, franchisees are not paying for that. They're paying a specific amount of royalties for the right to have the brand. They didn't pay for a business degree. And so those are the two reasons why franchisors don't do it. And what I tell franchisees is that, look, you're responsible for your business management. They're responsible to give you a proven brand, a product, service, image, marketing that works. It is your responsibility to learn the business acumen necessary to turn that amazing proven brand into profitability, right? And so we are one of the resources here at the Academy to teach you that information, to teach your district managers and your managers that information. And I even say, look, nowhere in your franchise agreement did it say that they were going to give you business degree. Right? Nowhere in there did they guarantee profits. You know why? Because the profits really depend not only on the business model that they're responsible for, but also how the franchisee implements that business. And so that is why franchisors don't do it. Now, the joint employer, the legal side may change a little bit here. The IFA is working really hard with government, with the American Franchise Act, to try to reduce that liability, so that the franchisors can start providing this knowledge and support to the franchisees and not risk the liability. I think it's going to pass. Don't know. I hope that it does, because that means that more franchisors will be free to teach this. We just hope that we become one of the resources to help them do that teaching, so that they don't have to spend the time, money, and resources that also is still going to be limited to help their franchisees. So that's why that is. And again, it's your business. So you get the knowledge so that you can be successful. That's what we say.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because when we were at IFA in February, there was a franchisor that came up to our booth that was like, we have 180 units, and an increasing number of our franchisees are starting to use the HubSpot CRM, or have been, and more are adopting the HubSpot CRM, but we cannot get involved. And I couldn't understand. Do you think that's connected somehow, or not necessarily? Why would a franchisor not be able to use the same system that their franchisees are using for
Is that specifically for lead management and sales? Or is that same platform being used to manage employees' activities in any other ways? Like schedule, for example?
It's really marketing, sales, and customer service is what it's managing.
Then the answer will be money and resources.
Okay.
It's not law. It's not legal.
Okay.
It's money and resources. And if you think about it, there's this concept that is royalty sufficiency, right? How many units do I need to have as a franchisor to have enough revenue come in to break even with my business expenses? That means that I'm not going to have a lot of specialized employees in my labor roster until such time that I can afford them. And, that means that even trainers or marketing people, or in all these specialized things that a mature, what I call legacy brands, they have huge departments. Yeah, great. But you know what? They have thousands of units, right? And so for a franchisor that is emerging, they have to be very, very careful to get to the break-even point as quickly as possible. For some franchisors, it might be 50 units. For some other ones, it might be 100. So until they get there, and that's break-even, until they get there, they have to be very careful about where they invest money and resources on internal support for franchisees to support all these activities that I'm sure they would love to have it, but they do not have the resources, right? So that's what I would say. Why would they not get involved in something that is not legally a legal issue? Is money and resources. They can only do so much.
Right. Yeah, that makes total sense. And I think the other thing that, so many not all franchises, of course, there are exceptions, and that they're very strategic exceptions where some brands don't want multi-unit owners, but the majority of franchises really like multi-unit owners. So, and that's,
I know. Why don't want multi-unit owners?
No, I'm just saying, I'm saying examples like Chick-fil-A, for example. They've got a very specific model that it's owner operated. So of course, if you owner operated, it's really hard to operate more than one, right? But they really are the exception. And there might be a few others. I know there are a few med spa brands, for example, that have really struggled because as soon as they try and replicate it, it becomes problematic, and they might need some of your advice. Coming back to sort of the multi-unit piece, because I think that that is something that's really interesting. And most franchises are dependent on their franchisees being successful with their first unit so that they become multi-unit owners, right? So what are the core systems that every franchisee and then potential multi-unit franchisee needs before attempting to scale across multiple locations or teams?
Such a great question. It's interesting. One of our franchisor clients, and literally, franchisor really finds us because of the franchisees that go through our programs. Then they tell the franchisor. But in this particular franchisor was different. They were actually Googling and trying to find resources for their franchisees because they knew that they were an emerging brand. And then they didn't have the time, the money, the resources, or even the experience on how do we teach our franchisees how to be successful. And they had experienced several failures in the multi-unit world. Like once people go from 1 to 2, it's a completely different business. And they had acquired this particular brand and had experienced a lot of failures in multi-unit because they were not prepared to do so. And so they were looking for resources. And with us, what they do is then they do not allow people go multi-unit unless they go through our program. And that's how they ensure that these franchisees are successful. And so there's several things that a franchisee needs to put in place to be able to scale successfully. And the first one is they need to obviously understand the business model very well. And I love it when they are initially franchise operators, right? That they are the ones that open the unit and they actually experience the running of the shift, the doing schedules, doing the inventory. Because if you have that level of detailed understanding on the business, you're going to set yourself for success. And so I think that's definitely number one, understanding the brand, the model, how it works, what makes it work, successfully. Now, obviously that's not enough when you go in multi-unit because it works when you have one unit because you're there all the time. You open, you close, you're shoulder to shoulder with the employees, you build relationships, they see you, they know you, they know what you stand for. And, if something, it doesn't work well, you can take over and kind of, overcome that issue. Once you go to 2 units, you cannot there's still 24 hours in a day. You have to be able to empower people. And here's where it changes, right? Now you need to not only be able to grab this amazing brand and all the tools and training and materials that they provide to be able to consistently execute that brand, across the street, across the state, across the country, or across the world. Right? They need to take that same discipline of definition of systems and processes into the business systems, right? We call the brand systems. We call them brand systems, right? Product, service, image, marketing. Those are the brand systems. But then you have the business systems, which are how to hire, retain great people, right? How to capture and increase your revenue year over year, right? How to control the cost so that you can maximize profitability. And then how do you scale beyond the 1 unit successfully and consistently? So those are the 4 buckets in which we group the systems that the franchisee must create. And so they need to now have the ability to understand what those are, define them very well for their company. So, for example, you need to have a very robust system on how to hire people. So what is the hire people? Well, there are 4 phases in the employee life cycle for hiring. The first one is recruiting. The second one is interviewing. The third one is a job offer. And the last one is onboarding. So this is how we group everything in very clear, specific steps and processes, right? And so if you want to have your leaders across multiple units, and, usually what we talk to our franchisees is not just 2 units. What's your ultimate goal? You want to have 25? You want to have 50? You want to have, how many do you want to have? And then you have to build the systems to that. So if you want to say get to 10 units, okay. So if you have 10 units, can you hire everybody? The answer is no. So you need to define the system. Again, recruiting, interviewing, hiring, onboarding, and then documented whatever's in your head and in your heart or how you do it and you want them to do it, it has to be documented. But you have to first define it because you know it intuitively when you do it. But then you have to actually document it, what that looks like. Once you document it, now you can train people to do it the exact same way that you want it to be done, that is consistently and in alignment with your values and your procedures and your knowledge and experience. Now you can train them to do it. But that's not enough. Now you need to delegate it to them. You need to empower for them to do it and not micromanaging them and over the shoulder looking, right? Once they're trained, you need to give them the empowerment because you cannot be training, you cannot be interviewing people all the time. You need to be focusing on the next location and the next access to capital and the next leaders and so many other things. And so when I say that the systems of the business systems, I mean, it's a lot of them. We actually have a very large assessment that when we onboard our clients, they go through that so that we understand where they're at with that, right? And what happens is that if you've been a franchisee for a long time, through the school of hard knocks, you'll figure it out. It's going to take you years to get there. And some people are more systematic than others.
Sure.
There's some people that just fly by the seat of the pants, right? And then they're trying to, grow this, multi-unit organization without the discipline of sitting down and documenting. It's hard for some people. And so those are the ones that are systematic thinking are the ones that are able to accomplish that dramatic, explosive growth. And the ones that are not systematic are the ones that are struggling and get stuck. And so that's how we bucket, right? The first one is the team bucket. How do you hire, retain great people? Number one, most important. If you don't get that one out, do not pass go. There's nothing else you can do if you don't get that one. The second one, of course, is how do you capture and increase your revenue? Because even if you have a proven brand, let's say that you have a McDonald's, right? The moment that you put the sign up, people will know it's McDonald's. And the moment that you say you're open, there will be a lineup, right? It will bring the initial revenue. But once that unit has been there 2, 3, 4, 5 years, to get sales growth year over year, yes, does the brand need to continue innovation and national marketing? Yeah, but the experience in the unit will determine the growth of that unit. And so now you need to own your sales, right? And so that's what the capturing and increasing revenue year over year with the local store marketing. And then the third one, controlling of the costs, right? You gotta know business. You'll be surprised how many franchisees cannot read a profit and loss statement. They do not understand it. They use it for tax purposes, really. That's the P&L is used for tax purposes and not for business decisions. Anyway, so that's the third bucket. And the last one is how to grow multi-unit. How do you create a structure and the infrastructure? When do you bring a district manager? When do you continue to use external resources like the accountant and, plumbing or maintenance? And when do you bring them in-house, right? And, that decision is so important because sometimes people overinvest in above store team when they're not ready, and then all the cash flow goes that way, and then wondering why I'm not profitable. So there's a lot of things that people that are going to go multi-unit need to think through and define and responsibly structure so that they can be successful sustainably, right? So that's a very long answer for you.
No, that was incredible. And it makes complete sense because it's, you're already showing the value of where people get stuck if they don't know these things, right? And I guess because my next question, and you maybe have already partly answered this, but where do you see most often the breakdowns when I guess they're a company, right? They have one unit, but when they're trying to replicate that success across other units or regions, like you were talking about earlier, where do you see the breakdown most often?
Yeah, and it is when the business owner thinks that they are going to be able to manage 2 and 3 the same way they manage 1. And it isn't. It's a completely different job. The same way that, when you are a unit manager and you get promoted to be a district manager, it's a completely different job. When you're a unit manager or a single unit franchisee, you are a doer. You open the unit, you do the schedules, you do the inventory, you do take care of the customers, you do hire the people, you do. The moment that you become a district manager or a multi-unit franchisee, you're now inspiring should be inspiring others to do. Completely different job, completely different set of skills, completely different perspective. And that's where the first breakdown happens. When you think that you're going to be managing the business the same way that you did when you had one unit. So that's like the first breakdown. Even worse if you don't have anything defined or documented or, and it's a lot of work. And sometimes people think, it should be easy. It is easy. It's just not simple. Right. And so, and you have to go through that hard work, either that or learn through years and years of the hard knocks. And again, if you're not a systematic person and you are, not systematic, you're going to struggle. It's going to be very hard. You're going to burn out. You really need to have help. So I think the first one, first breakdown is that not real thinking that you're going to be able to manage it the same way, and you can't. You simply
So
cannot.
it's making that shift of one type of leadership to a different type of leadership.
It's an immediate mind shift. The moment that you go to 2, you have to have that. And, if you think that you're going to be able to be let's say you were the manager of the first one. Oh, I'm going to be the manager of that one because you want to save that salary. Yeah, you're going to save the salary, but you're going to be working now 7 days a week, 24/7. And people are going to be calling. It's just not, it doesn't work. You have to have that mindset. Now, if you're going to stay with 2, okay, you can live through the chaos and eventually you'll find your new normal, still double.
Sure.
But if you want to grow beyond that, it's just not possible. It's not. And this is one of the things that very important about franchise models, and franchisors, is that when you're doing the unit economics analysis, you need to make sure that includes a manager salary, that the franchisee can actually have enough profitability, after paying a manager, to get enough return of their investment, because otherwise it's not a scalable model. If the salary or the salary of a manager that's not the franchisee is so much that there is not enough profit left over, then it's not a scalable model. And even for the franchisor, if you have single unit franchisees, that's a lot of management you have to do, because your FBC, so franchise business consultants, should be based on the number of franchisees they serve. And if you have a whole bunch of single unit franchisees, they're going to have less units that they can support, because if each one is one. But if you have successful multi-unit franchisees, now these FBCs can oversee more units because each franchisee represents more units.
Multiple. Yeah.
So it is even more, it's even more beneficial for the franchisor to have and encourage multi-unit. It's good for them and their financial, economics. And it is good for the franchisee because now they have the enterprise and they can just, continue to scale their profitability. It's good for the employees because they have the ability to grow now. They're not going to be stuck with one unit. They could become district managers at some point. And if it's big enough, a direct operations, this is a win-win-win for everybody, in my opinion. And so but then you need to be able to have the ability to have the franchisees go multi-unit by understanding that mind shift, that 1 unit is to do, 2 units is inspiring others to do. And how can you set them for success? And that's defining and documenting the systems that you can delegate to your team members.
Yeah. Wow. It makes total sense. So at the same time, Aicha, is there a struggle? And if so, how do you balance all this standardization that you're talking about with the flexibility that you also need as the organization grows?
Okay. So if you create a system, let's say, going back to the hiring process, right? You have to define and document and train one way to onboard your people in your organization. One way. There should be no flexibility on that one way.
That's a standard piece. Yeah.
It's like saying that you're going to do the Big Mac this way, but then, we need to be flexible so that we can make the Big Mac this other way. Well, no. If you want to have consistent results, it needs to be the one way. Now, in the business systems, though, there needs to be, what I would say the flexibility is the way that you approach some of the things. So, for example, when you do scheduling, right? So we teach how to approach scheduling from this very clear, specific process. Obviously, every brand is different, every model is different, every volume is different, but the way that you think about, or the way that you should think and process building is the most effective and efficient schedule is the same. That should not change at all in any way. The first step should always be sales projections. What are my sales? And depending on the business, I need to know it not just by the week, but by the day and even by the hour if I want to be as effective as possible. That way of approaching those systems should be the exact same way. Now, the policies that franchisees build around that building of the schedule, they need to be consistent. Are you going to be offering pay breaks or non-pay breaks? Do people come in every 15 minutes or every 30 minutes or on the hour? Do they have a minimum number of days they have to be available for? Like, there's certain policies that need to be firm so that you can have consistency. But then where the flexibility comes in is people's availabilities are different. Right. So obviously when you build the schedule, you make it fit, you have the people's availability fit what your needs are, but then when you're hiring, it's like all the systems are just intertwined. When you hire, you need to make sure that whoever you're hiring will have the availability that give you enough flexibility to be able to have that flexible schedules. So how you approach all of, and you need to, some franchises don't even think about those things. Right. And so that's the mindset and the thinking and the understanding on the business that, what you do in one thing affects others. Another thing is, turnover. There needs to be a process for you to be able to measure turnover in your organization, because turnover, we call it, is the biggest, most expensive, the biggest hidden expense in your P&L. Like, turnover is in almost every line item in your profit and loss statement, and you don't even know it. Most franchisees don't know the turnover. And turnover can tell you so much about your business. If you look at it as your organization, if you look at it by unit, if you look at it as a district, it tells you stories, right? And so that's why, it's still a system, a process that needs to be very clear, defined processes so that everybody knows and is clear how to go from A to B to C on all of the business systems. The flexibility comes in on how to think about them, right? How do you make the smart decisions to adapt? Okay, today's going to be rainy. We did not know about that. So therefore we need to, act upon it. Okay, what does rain mean in our business? In some businesses like Domino's, it means we're going to get very busy. In other businesses, it might mean that we're not going to get very busy, and the volume that we thought we're going to have is going to cut in half. So the managers and the franchisees need to have the ability to think that way and react so that you can have that profitability. So that's what I'm saying. It shouldn't be a lot of flexibility once you define the policies and procedures. It's just in the way that you think about it, you definitely need to have that. But you need to have the knowledge and the training to be able to make that, that thinking process the right way.
Yeah. And I guess the flexibility is really, it comes back to what you were saying about it's ultimately about leadership, right? Because any business that's growing is changing. And if there's change, then there needs to be flexibility. Really what's changing is the standardization of the systems that you're building, right? Because as you're growing, whether you're going from 1 unit to 2 units, or you're going from 2 units to 5 units as a multi-unit owner, or the same thing at the franchisor level, when you're going from 30 units to 100 units, things break. And when you go from 100 units to 300 units, things break. But it all comes back to, again, so you need flexibility in your systems to grow, but it's really like it's an ongoing thing, which starts, I think, with your point of, it starts with leadership, having the time and the ability to think about what's going to change when we go from 30 units to 50 units, or 30 units to 100 units. And how do we get ahead of that so that we can support all the people along the way?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I always see, from the franchisee perspective, that you should grow in these pods of a district manager area. Like, you should not go from 1 to 4, unless 4 is enough cash flow to pay for a district manager and, and have a good ROI. If not, you need to, the growth is not from 1 to 3 or 4 or 5. The growth is from 1 unit to a district manager area, minimum. Like, do not stay in the middle, because the middle of it is hell. That's why we call it the hell zone, right?
Yeah.
You go to 2 units up to hiring a first district manager is hell. So you got to get out of hell as quickly as possible so that you can get that district manager ideally promoted from within and not hire from the outside. 2 to 1 is better, because that way, that moment that you hire that district manager, now you have time freedom. You can delegate operations to that, that men and women, and they can take care of your operations while you continue to grow, and do other things. And I think that's very important. So pods. So that's what I say, pods. So how many district managers areas do you need to grow before you get that next layer, or what I would call the direct operations, right? But those pods, if your pod of district managers, right, 6 stores per unit, don't grow to 10. You need to grow to 12 to get another district manager. Otherwise, who's going to oversee those? You cannot burn that district manager. You got to have enough units to support another district manager. And so that's what I'm saying. The growth of a multi-unit should be in the pods of a district manager area. Otherwise you enter hell again, because then who's doing it? You. Sure. Right? And so it is very important. A lot of times people don't think that way. We just want to open as many stores, how many, and literally a lot of the decisions need to be driven by how many units can this market support, and can I have all those units so that I can get to the district manager area? And if you're thinking about opening more, are there enough for have another district manager area? And if not, then don't do it.
Then don't do it. Yeah.
Don't do it, because it's going to be hell, right? And that's something that not only do we teach franchisees, but we're trying to influence franchisors that when they're selling those market areas to think about it that way. because
Absolutely.
that way they will provide the ability for the franchisees to be successful and happy and free, right?
Uh-huh.
And they will be able to have success stories, right? And
Sure. Yeah.
so that's what I would say. Think about it in pods. So, and you were saying that the business breaks at this number of units. I don't know what that number of units are. I guess different brands have different things, but
Absolutely.
the
Yeah.
way that I see it is those pods, and then how many direct reports can you have? Let's say you're a franchisee, right? There's a study from Harvard that says the ideal number is 4 to 6 direct reports. Okay. So that's, they say 4 district managers, and then you have a bookkeeper and a maintenance person. That's 6, right?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
at some point in time, you need to then grow that infrastructure, but you have to do it smartly so that, again, your cash flow doesn't go out that way. So there's so much science behind these multi-unit growth. But again, it goes back to systems. If you are a systematic person, then you can have exposure to what we're talking about here, right? Or even having these larger franchisees that are so busy that know this, but don't have the time to teach it. But otherwise, where do you learn this? Like literally, where do franchisees learn this way of thinking? Which
Sure.
you say, yeah, it's logical, but sometimes this logical doesn't come up because you don't know what you don't know, right? And so,
Yeah.
yeah, but this is the way that we think, this is the way that we guide. And if they do it this way, if the franchisors sell their market areas this way and the franchisees grow and buy their market areas this way, I mean, it's just a win-win for everybody,
Yeah. No, absolutely. Aisha, I mean, so, a lot of your experience was on the food side, like QSR, right? But now, you're celebrating 10 years of AFA this year, and you've worked a lot with a lot of service brands, right?
Mhm.
Whether it's martial arts or gyms or cleaning services
Yeah,
or
right
wellness.
now, about 60% of our clients are food service and 40% are personal service. It's funny because people think, oh, yeah, you were with Domino's for 20 years and Popeyes and Olive Garden. And like, guys, I don't even cook. I don't
Yeah.
know anything about food. Wait, because we're not in food service. We're not cooking. Olive
No.
Garden, though, I'll tell you. Do you know that they did a lot of stuff from scratch, like the soups are from scratch, the pastas? Well, the pastas would cook them. I mean, it's amazing how many things Olive Garden does from scratch. It was crazy.
Yeah.
But in my mind, we were an assembly line. We were an assembly line, right? I mean, look at the
Sure.
Domino. It could not get any more assembly line than a Domino's operations. I mean,
Yeah.
Tom Monahan, the founder, was amazing. It was literally one of the rules of operations on building, the units was that the next step needed to be no more than one step away. So from the phones, when we used to get orders by the phone, right? The dough was a step away. The sauce was a step away. The pepperoni was a step away, and all the ingredients were like within 3 steps. And then the oven, you turn around, it was 1 step. Literally, it was it is the most effective, most efficient assembly line ever. And
Right.
so, because we focus on the management and leadership principles, it doesn't really matter what industry we're in because
Right.
it all applies, right?
Absolutely.
So I
So
don't know
I
if you
guess,
were going for that, but yeah.
yeah, no, my question was really what, I mean, if there are any differences between you, I know you call them personal services, which I think is a good way to, I mean, if you think about it, martial arts, gyms, cleaning, wellness, education, those
Mhm,
that they fit into that category.
mhm.
But from an operational perspective, which then of course impacts, hiring and profitability and whatever, what differences do you see between services franchises and, QSR or retail
Mhm.
type brands?
Yeah, so there's a couple of differences. So the first one is that in food service, your biggest expense is cost of goods, right? That is the biggest expense in most food service businesses. In service businesses, it's cost of goods. A lot of them have cost of goods, but usually is much smaller, anywhere between 17 to 5% of sales, right? And some of them is like nothing, like schools. What's the cost of goods, right? Unless they're
Yeah.
serving food, they're not, it's very, very little. So
Sure.
that's, I think, the first difference. The second one, obviously, then the labor is the other one. In in a service-based business, labor is the biggest expense,
Yes. Right.
while in food service is the second one. I mean, they're pretty high up, but second one. Now,
Sure.
funny enough, usually the cost of goods of the food service is almost the same as a percentage as the labor and the cost of goods in the other ones. It's just how much It's on each is the difference.
Okay.
So I would say that's the first one. The second one is that when you're in food service, you're looking at your business in terms of by the hour. When you're in food service, if you're a good operator, and I'm sure all the good operators that are listening to this, they know that you manage that business by the hour. Every hour you're looking at the volume, how many people you have there by the hour, right? When it comes to service, personal service, health and wellness, all those, some of them you look at your labor costs your business really by the day, sometimes by the week, and some of them because it's membership based by the month. Right. And one of the things that we do is we train and share how to build their dashboards. And we highly encourage everybody to do weekly dashboards because we want, you see every day, your certain reports, but every week you want to have a very robust KPI dashboard. But we found that membership based service businesses, it doesn't change so much week to week. It's more of a month to month. And
Sure.
so, and I think that's another way, that's different. You still have the same categories per se, except for cost of goods, and you might look at them a little bit more long term than you do when it comes to food service. I think that's one of the biggest differences. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's very much from a P&L perspective. What differences are there from an operational,
Yeah. I mean, this is all operational though. How you look at your
No, it
business,
is.
it's
Yeah.
very important. I would say the manpower, right? In food service, it's most of the people that are coming in, this is a first time job. So they might be coming out of high school. They may be in high school, they may be going through college, and it's very, for most people, it's a temporary job. Even though if you are there and you are listening to this, I want to encourage you to think food service is more than the temporary job. Clearly, there are all kinds of opportunities, district managers, direct operations, marketing people, financial people. I mean, it is just, I joined as a temporary job and I'm here 35 plus years later, still loving it. And so that I would say that's another very big difference is that the employees, the manpower that is coming into the food service is that while in a lot of the service-based businesses, you are required to be, this is more of career-oriented people, right? They have to have certifications if you're going to be a statistician or if you're going to be, a trainer or if you're going to be even working now with all these pet businesses and you need veterinarians and nurses if you're going to be doing an IV bar. I'm like, wow, the manpower is different because now they need to be certified. They have to have some sort of education. I mean, it is a different manpower, and how you lead and manage and inspire the people that are just coming out of high school versus, mature, career oriented, or at least specialized people is just different. How you motivate them, how you find them, how do you motivate them, how do you keep them is different. And you need to really learn about that in a particular industry for sure. Significant difference.
Yeah. And I guess, and then I suppose on the sort of, you talked about the four areas, like one of them being, you're the second one after the team piece is the capture piece. Is there a difference? Is one easier or more complicated? So again, between food service and personal service, is it easier to capture customers in one or the other?
I in general terms is very different because when you are in not just food service, but even retail, let's say if you are like a Lego store, right?
Yeah.
You are more in volume and you are more, it's a low ticket, high volume business. And how you manage that versus how you manage a membership base, which is where a lot of services are going through to membership base is different, right? So in here, you are relying on normal, regular marketing, social media, reach out, so forth, so on. But when you're looking at the service-based business, you need to create funnels, process, the callbacks, the CRMs. We don't have a CRM in food service, right? I mean, our CRM was do a great job, great product, and people will come back, right? But when you are looking at this service-based business, especially the membership ones, you definitely need to have a robust CRM process and sales skills, right? I mean, do you really need to teach somebody in the cashier on how to be a salesperson? I mean, ideally but not really. But when you're selling a membership that might be $1,000 for the year, you need to have some sales skills, right? And so the training is different for sure, and how you manage that and how do you approach that. And that's one of the things that is definitely different between high volume, retail business versus the personal service, education, health and wellness.
Yeah.
How you handle it is completely different. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I really love that explanation. Okay. So Aisha, unfortunately, we've come to the point where we have to start wrapping things up. So I have one last question for you. As you know, well, when we were at IFA together in February, I went to, you were running the unit economics session. I went to the AI session, because we kind of had to divide and conquer. But nowadays it's hard to go through a 45-minute conversation without talking about how AI is going to be impacting, including the franchise space. So how do you, looking ahead, how do you see operational systems evolving alongside AI and sort of modern go-to-market strategies for franchises?
Yeah. So, I don't know how much yet is going, 'cause in the last 4 years, we went from, hey, there's this new thing about AI, and we were going to these conferences and learning about what AI was, what it could potentially do, how to think about it, right? To now, the sessions that you go to, especially this year, is not about what it is, but now how you're actually being used in tactical, practical ways in the industry. I would say that, again, going back to food service and retail, I don't know how much immediately it's going to affect operations, day-to-day operations. I think that is more about the above store office, processes that is maybe being more implemented. I do see in the personal service, health and wellness is being implemented more with like AI agents. Again, going back to the CRM, is allowing us to reach out to more people more consistently. So I have actually a couple of clients that have implemented that, like phone calls, customers calls, and no matter what time they call, they can actually get information and data. We have an AI agent now in our website. So if anybody comes to our website, they can actually go in there and talk to them, and that agent, Frank,
Yep.
Chise, franchise. Anyway,
Franchise.
so you can ask them anything about our academy, and so they can, get the information they need. And so I think that you're going to start seeing a lot more of that. Somebody in the last, a multi-unit, I think is when I went, they were saying about how they have cameras observing what everybody is doing, and then making a report recommendation to the manager on how to better manage things. Now, they were the exception, because there was another franchisee that was just as large. He said, like, I'm not doing anything like that yet. So
Yeah.
I think it's going to be slower in the retail food service business. And I think maybe in the personal service, that type of, funnel version is
Sure.
being more and more implemented, just to be more efficient and effective. I think that's where I see it. I love technology, by the way. I had my first laptop in 1993, 12-ton IBMer. So I'm all in on that. And one of my personal developments is about AI and how to implement it in our academy.
Sure.
And so if you are thinking about it, for anybody out there, you really need to get in there and just start using it, implement it, and see how it can make us better, because it's here to stay. And it's just going to become more and more ingrained in what we do every day.
Yeah, I think that's great. And in fact, the example that you gave of your Frank, I think is actually the perfect one for a lot of the Zors that are listening to this, because one of the statistics I read recently was that most new franchisees or prospective franchisees are doing their research between 8 p.m. and 6 a.m. There's not a lot of friend dev people, working at that time. So if you can have, your friend dev AI bot on your website answering all the questions, because I mean, this is a huge decision, right? For first time franchisees to be making. If you could put all that information on your AI bot on your website, I mean, you could really do yourself a huge favor. And when the Fran Dev team comes in the morning and switches on their computers at 8 a.m., they might have a meeting booked with a potential franchisee. So I
A
think
hundred percent.
that alone is a great example.
A
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. Your Frank should have links to video promotions, promo videos explaining your business. They have links to your website and seeing your menu or your services. Your Frank should have all of that information available so that they can take care of the people. And you're right, because if they're looking for a franchise, they have a full-time job.
Yeah.
And so they're going to be doing it at night for sure. And so definitely very, very important. And that's just the beginning of it, right? Having your agent, your agent available for that, I think it's super important.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Aicha, thanks so much. I know we could talk for another hour, but thanks so much for joining me today. I really enjoyed the conversation, and I'm sure the listeners did too.
Thank you. I appreciate for the invitation and for allowing me to share my message.
Yes, I look forward to the next conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.